Welcome to the Explainer. So today, we're basically playing visual detectives. We're going to take this dense, highly specific graphic about banking compliance and completely deconstruct it. We really want to decode exactly how this imagery communicates some pretty heavy regulatory messages.
But right before we actually reveal the image, I want you to think about something. How in the world do you visually represent banking compliance? Seriously, this is a genuinely tough question. When you're dealing with abstract regulatory goals, literally pages upon pages of dense legal jargon, and totally invisible digital data flows, how on earth does all of that translate into visual design? I mean, how do you actually draw a picture of a privacy law? Well, that is the exact puzzle we're solving today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Just take a really good look at what's on your screen. This right here is the DGPSI Banks Framework graphic, which stands for the Data Governance and Protection Standard for India. I'm just going to leave this up for a second so you could really absorb the complexity here, because wow, there is a lot going on, right? We've got different colors, all these distinct icons, various text blocks, and even national symbols just colliding into one single banner. At first glance, it might just look like a simple collage, but I promise you, every single element you're seeing has been deliberately chosen to convey a very specific, heavily layered message about data security to banking professionals. All right, moving into Section 1, the components of compliance. Let's start decoding this visual anatomy.
So to give you a quick mental roadmap, we're going to be examining 4 key visual metaphors today. First up, we've got the bank vault and padlocks. Second, there's this really interesting cluster featuring a torch, a book, and an antique key. Third, we'll look at those fanned-out Indian rupee notes spilling over. And lastly, the whole Made in India pacing lion.
Section 2, Symbols of Banking Security, where we really see this physical versus digital dynamic play out.
Now, if you direct your attention to the left side, what we're seeing is this absolutely fascinating visual tension. On one side of the ledger, you've got this super traditional physical security imagery, right? I'm talking heavy bank vaults and antique keys. But then, right alongside it, you have this incredibly modern text referencing the DPDPA, that's the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and DGPSI. By mixing these two worlds, the graphic anchors the totally invisible threat of digital data breaches right into a tangible physical reality. It's a really clever way to visually illustrate just how robust this compliance framework actually is.
Now, what's really interesting about this part is how these elements actively interact with each other. Look at the top left. You've got physical Indian rupee notes totally fanned out, and they're spilling directly over a torch and a padlocked book. And right next to that, we have a literal bank vault, which is also firmly padlocked. The imagery is doing something super clever here. By placing physical currency so it spills right out of these symbols for data protection and knowledge, it's visually equating digital data with literal physical wealth. In this visual language, securing a customer's data is literally treated with the exact same visual weight, the exact same importance, as locking stacks of cold hard cash inside a solid steel vault.
Then, as we move inward, we hit the true visual anchor of the whole thing, that large 3D golden plaque right in the center that reads DGPSI Banks. Notice how literally everything else kind of orbits around this block? It's rendered in this really nice gold gradient, which instantly gives it this premium, highly authoritative feel, and it's physically the largest text element on the entire board. This basically frames DGPSI Banks as the central solution. Actually, it's the literal and figurative bridge connecting all those heavy security metaphors on the left to the national identity stuff we're about to see on the right.
All right, Section 3, the Indian context. Let's talk about local solutions.
Shifting our focus over to the right side of the image, we start to see where this framework establishes a very explicit geographic identity. Right there, plain as day against a golden background, we have the phrase, Made in India. And honestly, that is a powerful statement of origin. The creators of this graphic want to make it unequivocally 100% clear that this is absolutely not some generic, imported, globally homogenized compliance standard. No, this has a highly localized origin. It was built specifically from the ground up for the Indian banking landscape.
And you have to notice that pacing lion silhouette walking right alongside the Made in India text. Now, this isn't just any generic lion graphic. It's a widely recognized, iconic shape that strongly reinforces national identity and domestic creation. So the crucial takeaway here is this. The visual is boldly telling Indian banking institutions that their local compliance needs are being met by a fiercely local, homegrown solution. It really projects this undeniable sense of domestic pride and localized strength,
Bringing us to Section 4, the ultimate objective, our foundational goal.
If you look at the dark blue banner spanning the very bottom, the text reads, "For DPDPA compliance in a banking institution." Visually speaking, this acts as the literal floor. It's the ground that the vault, the gold plaque, and the lion are all standing on. Because think about it, without this banner, we just have a totally random collection of security and national symbols. But having this explicit definition right at the bottom gives every single metaphor we just talked about its ultimate objective. It grounds the entire visual collage into solving one very specific regulatory requirement: compliance with the Digital Personal Data Protection Act.
And this brilliantly illustrates our final takeaway today. When we sort of pull back and synthesize the complete graphic, the full, cohesive story emerges. The spilling Indian rupees, the torch, that heavy vault, they represent the immense value and the physical level protection required for digital data. Then, the golden DGPSI Banks plaque provides the specific framework name you need to actually achieve that. The pacing lion ensures it's viewed as an authentically Indian solution. And finally, that foundational blue banner unites the whole shebang to solve one specific puzzle. It is just a perfectly complete, targeted narrative told entirely through layered visual metaphors.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought you can apply in your own professional environment. How exactly does your local institution visually represent data security? Seriously, go look closely at the infographics, the internal posters, or those massive framework diagrams your company uses. Do they rely on physical metaphors like locks and vaults to explain digital problems? Are they weaving in elements of national or corporate identity? Start looking for these visual clues in your own world. I guarantee you'll be amazed at what you find once you actually start paying attention. Thanks so much for joining me on this visual deconstruction, and keep seeking clarity in the details.